I want to show you a real world contract that I used with a subcontractor and see how everything that we've talked about so far in terms of clarifying the expectations is in that contract. So this is a contract that I had with a really great designer called Arthur. He helped me on a project with a client called Pretentex. He helped me on the branding. So you'll see that a lot of this contract is actually looks like the creative brief, but also adds a few more details on the communication and other legal terms. So let's start. The goal is we need to have 2 creative directions for the brand finalized by a date. And then this is an overview of the project, quite like the ones in the brief, a little bit about the company, and then what we need. Note that I'm defining here really even to the kind of file format. So we need presentations in Keynote format, showcasing 2 directions. Each direction should have a name, show references, and how the logo was concept with some mock-ups. And I've actually added an example for how I like to structure my presentation. So everything is really clear. There's a reference for exactly what I need. Afterwards, I will need the logo in vector format and all the mock-ups in PSD format. So again, very clear what files I'll need and what formats. Here are the presentation mock-ups that should be included: business card, office sign, big conference stage, social media t-shirt, and a homepage hero. And again, I told him for the hero of the homepage, just use the value proposition or big idea from the strategy presentation that I gave him in the original brief. In terms of creative direction, a little bit of how it needs to look like. So it needs to be modern and techy, but also feel established, and a little bit bullet points about the creative direction. Then there's a whole section here about the confidentiality, which was in this specific project was something very important. So I wrote here, this project is super confidential and you might need to sign an NDA. So an NDA stands for non-disclosure agreement. In this case, I needed to sign this, but at the end of the day, the subcontractor didn't need to sign this, but it was very important to clarify how, nothing about this project is to be communicated outside of this project. So no mentions on social media, on the web, or anything like this. After the project is launched and live, showcasing the project in your portfolio is subject to the client approval. Basically, it should be okay, but just don't do it without permission. So note how we clearly state all of these things before we start the project, okay? So there's no miscommunication later on. You also agree not to directly contact the client without prior consent from me for the next 2 years. This is called non-solicitation. Just basically means that he's not going to go ahead and steal my client. This is how we talk about the payment. So the hourly rate for the project is $40. And please let me know how you're going to track or report the hours. But he did give me an estimate of how many hours the project is going to take beforehand. I will pay via PayPal or Pioneer on the first of each month upon receiving an invoice. And then this is also very important, sync. This is how we are going to communicate. So because this project is very short, it was 1 week, I suggested we do weekly checkout to see where we are, get feedback, and see that we're on the right track. Let me know what time works for you, and let's use Trello to keep track on tasks and share files. So everything in terms of how often are we going to sync and what tools we're going to use for sync is mentioned in this contract. In terms of the legal terms, this is work for hire, which means that all work or intellectual property belongs to the client, so not even to me. But this is very important to write so that it doesn't happen. Depending on where the subcontractor are, they might claim that the intellectual property or the idea belongs to them. So it's very important to mention that this is work for hire, basically meaning that the intellectual property belongs to the client, and project might be canceled at any stage. If not going in the right direction, you will be paid for the work already done. Again, these are terms that you need to negotiate, but those are the terms that I put in the contract, and we basically signed this. So here's what I want you to remember. First of all, you need to clarify on top of what you need in terms of files and the actual work, how you're going to communicate. So are you going to have a weekly sync? Are you going to have a daily sync? Is it going to be on Zoom? What tools are you going to use to communicate feedback and revisions on the work? Make sure that is very, very clear, and make sure that you put in the clause on non-solicitation, just so it's clear that they can't go behind your back and then, start working directly with the client. And one last thing that I wanted to show you is in this business processes doc, you'll have here a brief example that you can use kind of as a template, the one that I showed you, and also the interview process. And the link to the proposal that I showed you, the contract, is going to be below this video if you need to look at it for your reference when setting up your own contracts.